border descending into chaos, forcing the shutdown of the San Ysidro crossing. And you can see there migrants looking for a point of entry moving towards the border facility near San Diego, California. This is the very latest development this weekend, which also includes the incoming Mexican government now denying that it has reached a deal with the Trump administration to allow asylum seekers to remain in Mexico and not to enter the U.S. This denial follows a pair of tweets in which the president confirmed a controversial asylum overhaul. This morning, in an exclusive interview on Meet the Press, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Elijah Cummings, blasted the policy change.
That's not the law. They should be allowed to come in, seek asylum. That's the law. And we don't...
Would you support changing the law?
No. No, I think that we have a system that has worked for a long time. This president has come in, wants to change it. That's up to him. But now the Congress has got to stand up, and hopefully they will.
Do you think what he's doing is constitutional?
I don't.
All right, so for the very latest, let's go to NBC News' Hans Nichols in Tijuana, Mexico. He's been there reporting live on what has developed there. Hans, bring us up to speed of what you've seen over the last couple of hours and what's happening now.
Okay, well, so Ayman, right behind me, you see a bunch of migrants that attempted to cross the border. They are coming back. Now, this group of migrants left that shelter earlier this morning. They crossed the Tijuana River. Remember, they were deterred by riot police. There were some confrontations, and they came to a different point of entry. Right here is the old San Ysidro point of entry, the pedestrian bridge. That's been closed along with everything else. They busted through this fence, the migrants did. They tried to get up above this escarpment here. Up above that embankment is a railroad bridge, and they tried to find some soft spots in the border, probing it. To really give you a sense of what we're seeing here, at one point we saw a family carrying a ladder and carrying a stroller, and that really captures what we're seeing here. Yes, there are young men, but there are also a lot of families. You also see a lot of children. Now, right now, this seems to be a moment of defeat for the migrants, because when they busted out, I wouldn't say busted, but when they marched out of their shelter this morning, they were full of confidence and they simply couldn't take it anymore. They thought they'd be able to make their claims in front of a border and at an actual point of entry. This is what they've been left with. Here they are coming back. Now, just to give you a sense of what the military presence is like, I would say there are 3 or 4 helicopters basically circulating in a half-a-mile radius going over the head. That gives us a sense. That looks like a military helicopter to me. That gives you a sense of just how militarized this all is. Now, up there, you see federal police. That's an indication that those are federal Mexican police. Now, for the most part, those federal Mexican police in full riot gear have been very professional and very restrained. They did block the crossing across a bridge that got the migrants to this point, and that's why we saw those migrants go down into the Tijuana River, filled with raw sewage, all the way to come back here. Now, Ayman, what we don't know is what happens next. We don't know where all these migrants are going to sleep tonight and whether or not they're going to go back to the filthy shelter, that area where they have been staying, because clearly they didn't make it across the border today. Ayman?
So, Hans, I got to ask you, I mean, I noticed that there's obviously a presence of media there. Is this something that had been planned in terms of the arrival of news crews and media there? I mean, we've been talking about the Caravan for some time. Is this part of the same Caravan that we have been talking about that left Central America months ago and made its way to the border?
Yeah.
What is the composition of the migrants and what you're seeing there today?
Most of the migrants that we've talked to are saying they're from Honduras. This is part of that first caravan that left. There was initially around 7,000. There appear to be about 5,000 people here, maybe even more from that. Remember, there are other caravans that are coming up. So in terms of media presence, yeah, I mean, this is a dramatic moment. In terms of the planning on this, there was one sign yesterday that we saw that they were planning to make this move at 5 a.m. That move ended up happening at 9 a.m. when they left and they marched out of their shelter. So there's a fair amount of media here. You're right to say that. This is really the dramatic end of the day, because earlier they had so much confidence and they thought they might be able to make their claims in person. The backdrop to all this is the new decision and whether or not it is actually a final deal between the incoming Mexican government and the Trump administration, and that is, will they deny the ability to these migrants to apply for asylum in the United States, or are they going to process their applications here? I can tell you, if they process those applications here and the new government and the Trump administration do finalize this deal, you're going to have some very frustrated migrants on this border. We should also mention that some Tijuana residents also are frustrated with the presence of these migrants. They're saying it's a strain on resources. The mayor of Tijuana, of course, calling it a humanitarian crisis. Ayman?
All right, Hans Nichols live for us there in Tijuana, Mexico. Thanks for that, Hans. And joining us now on the phone is Chris Sherman, a correspondent for the Associated Press in Mexico, who tweeted out a short while ago that there were tear gas canisters being lobbed in the direction of those migrants. Chris, good to have you with us. Bring us up to speed in terms of what you saw throughout the course of the afternoon.
Sure. The migrants, after they had marched away from the shelter, eventually crossed the Tijuana River. Some tried to enter the Mexican customs area at the El Chaparral border crossing. Police blocked them there. They then tried to walk along the Tijuana River to where it intersects with the U.S. border wall. And they were there for a while. And at the very bottom of the Tijuana River, at that point, there's an earthen levee with 3 strands of stacked concertina wire. Eventually, some of the migrants began to filter down to that area at the bottom, and there's a small gap in the earthen levee where the water trickles through. And interviewing a family who was down there at the time, I was up on the side of the river watching. They said that some of the migrants managed to open a small hole in that concertina wire, and that's when the U.S. agents began firing tear gas. I saw at least half a dozen, maybe 10 canisters launched into Mexico, and the breeze was carrying into Mexico. So we were running for several minutes to get out of the cloud of tear gas. There were lots of small children, women passing off small children to men to try to run faster, people discarding their backpacks. It was chaotic for a while.
So in the aftermath of those tear gas canisters being lobbed in the direction of those migrants and ultimately dispelling them, did they attempt to regroup? Did the situation escalate, or was that one incident or those few minutes of chaos that you described enough to...
As we're speaking, I don't know if you hear the booms, but they've just started firing tear gas again. People are pulling back. They had retreated quite some ways, and then some started to get closer to the line. People are now sprinting away from the clouds of tear gas. The Mexican federal police had managed to move most of the migrants back to the other side of the Tijuana River. That's where the majority of them are now. But now it appears, yes, U.S. agents have fired more tear gas.
Chris, the suggestion that they are close enough to the border that tear gas would push them back is an indication that they're not necessarily that far away from the border. Can you give us a sense of how far and how many migrants are being tear gassed, or how close they are to the border?
Oh, there are a couple hundred who are there in the area of the tear gas. I'm not sure how far it's going to carry this time. But, yeah, there are a couple hundred migrants out here at the Tijuana River right now.
And what's the sense of determination among the migrants that you're seeing there? Are they waiting for the tear gas to dissipate for them to try to make another entry, or do you feel that this is going to be enough to try to keep them at bay for the rest of the day?
At this point, you've seen most of the families pull back. So many kids received gas on the first go-round that I think parents have wisely moved back with them. I think the people who have been approaching the border this time seem to be mostly young men.
All right, Chris Sherman from the Associated Press. Be safe out there. We're going to try to connect with you again throughout the program. Chris Sherman from the Associated Press live on the Mexico-U.S. border there. I want to bring in our panel now. Nayyera, former White House senior director and former State Department senior advisor. Erin Banco, the Daily Beast national security reporter. And Mehdi Hasan, the Intercept columnist and host of the Deconstructed podcast. Great to have all of you with us. Nayyera, let me begin with you, if I may. What is the significance of what we were talking about earlier, this attempted and possible deal between the government of Mexico, the incoming government of Mexico, and the Trump administration, when you juxtapose it with the images that we're seeing coming out right now of the border between the U.S. and Mexico?
For all the talk we have of domestic constitutional crises, we are now seeing a crisis of international law, international treaties, and international convention in closing this border and denying any access to refugees or asylum seekers to even be heard. The United States is setting itself up to have a claim launched against it in the International Criminal Court. This action taken today of closing the world's busiest border goes against the Convention on Refugees and Their Rights, Rights, in which it is clearly stated that any country that is signed onto the convention, which the United States has, owes asylum seekers and refugees administrative access, travel documents, identity documents, and free access to courts. Now, the challenge is, of course, going to be who is going to challenge the United States in the international court system. Someone has to say the United States has broken the law, and this is exactly where the Trump administration is finding the space to operate by finding these gaps in the system and hoping that its dominance as the United States will carry itself through as it violates international law.
So Mehdi, let me ask you really quickly, why would the Mexican government go along with this? I mean, obviously there is this argument that the Trump administration has made or is tweeting out, which for its own intents and purposes has not been verified, has not even been agreed to by the Mexican government, saying that this is a done deal. Obviously, the Mexicans are saying, no, it is not a done deal. But why would the Mexican government, given what we just heard from Nayyera, laying out the international law aspect of this, even agree to something like this?
Well, I think, Ayman, you made the key point. It's not yet been verified, which I think applies to literally everything that comes out of this administration in the U.S. The Mexican government have put out this weirdly conflicting statement. The incoming government, which doesn't take power till the beginning of December, has put out this conflicting statement saying no, that no deal, no agreement's been made. But on the one hand, OK, we're considering it. We might be keeping them here in Mexico while they apply for asylum. I just think we don't know. This is a different government. AMLO, President Lopez Obrador, the new president who's coming in, is a populist leader. Trump maybe thinks he can do a deal with him. Trump likes to pretend to be a deal maker, as we know, but he doesn't actually have any deals to show for it over the last, 2 years in office. So I'm highly skeptical of anything that comes out from this administration or even from the Mexican government that's yet to be, because, this is a president, I mean, let's not forget who told the last Mexican president. Do you remember the transcript came out of their call where he says, just say you're paying for the wall. Right. I don't need you to actually do it. Just say it, because everything Trump does on this issue is for domestic consumption. He doesn't actually care about immigration or refugees or how many people come into the country in and of itself. This is all for domestic consumption. The Caravan was for domestic consumption. Building the wall was to get him elected as president, and he thought he could do it again. These are all artificial, fake crises. Let me just say one statistic for your viewers at home as they see these, shocking images. Illegal border crossings, when Donald Trump became president, were at a 40-year low. There was no crisis at the border. Right. There still is no crisis at the border.
So let me ask you this, Erin. Walk us through the process that we also heard Hans reference in terms of asylum seekers and the right that they have to enter the United States to apply for asylum. The Mexican government, actually the mayor of Tijuana, calling what we saw there, as Hans referenced, a humanitarian crisis with these 5,000 or so migrants and potential asylum seekers. But give us a sense from your reporting how this process is supposed to play out and how it can play out.
Sure, that is a correct statement. This is a true humanitarian crisis. And as we see what's unfolding on the border, we can compare what's unfolding on the border to what we've seen happen with mass migration and people seeking asylum in other parts of the world. What's supposed to happen is that there's supposed to be freedom of movement. And these individuals, men, women, and children, are supposed to be able to seek asylum at ports of entry. And they shouldn't have to wait in their country of origin as that asylum process unfolds. Now, with this hypothetical or potential deal that's on the table, which we have, yet to see it unfold, the problem and the concern is that these men, women, and children who are fleeing persecution will have to reside in this country that they are so desperately trying to leave.
Right.
And that is a very precarious situation for them to be in. Now, I've talked to former DHS officials who say that the Trump administration is implementing regulations and rules that perhaps will make this crowd more frustrated and will make this crowd so frustrated that they'll be able to potentially try to seek illegal entry, and it will just get out of control. So that's their main concern right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I don't do math very well, but when you do 5,000 migrants, and according to, I think Hans was saying it's about 100 or so that would be processed a day, you can just imagine how long of a process that would be for those people stuck there on the border.
Exactly.
Erin Banco, thank you very much. Mehdi Hasan, Nayyera, stick around for us. We're going to talk to you guys a little bit later on in the program.